Well, so as I've said so far, we're going to get Alan Park on the programme. I'll just give you a little bit of background. Alan's a Canadian comedian who I was fortunate enough to meet in Toronto a few weeks ago, and we were over there as part of the Worldwide Wake Up Tour. He's an absolutely fascinating man. We had a great chat, and there and then asked him to come on the show because he's got an amazing story to tell that I'm sure many people listening will be able to relate to. In 2013, he started to experience some pain, went to the doctors in the summer and the fall, the autumn of that year. Nothing terrible turned up. Over-the-counter painkillers he lived just to get by. And it gradually started to deteriorate. Towards the end of 2013, in November, he went into an emergency room, which obviously A&E in Canada, and was diagnosed with aggressive advanced prostate cancer with a PSA level of 700. On the 24th of November, he made his first batch of oil, cannabis oil that is, and by the 28th he no longer required the morphine, which had been basically keeping him going for that period before that. In late December, a top surgeon gave him 10 to 12 months to live. This is in October to December 2014. So, clearly, as I said at the top of the hour, that's not happened because he's chatting to me tonight in 2017. Just before we get him on, we're going to play a short clip, which is a BBC clip about cannabis oil, talking about its potential benefits in treating cancer. The start of the clip, you're going to hear from a cancer sufferer, and then you're going to hear from a BBC voiceover and a BBC doctor. Have a listen to this.
You know, everyone looks at it like you're getting high, and it's not. It's a medical. It's a natural option that the government's ignoring, and I want to live. I have to live.
Cannabis has been used as a medicine for centuries. It's legal in half US states. A British drugs company is trialling a new cancer drug, and Britain's leading cancer research group is interested.
Cannabinoids are certainly very interesting molecules, and there's a lot of research. There's hundreds of papers being published looking at their chemical properties against cancer cells. Turning that into effective treatments is a long road, and certainly it's not going to be the one cure for cancer, because nothing is.
See, I find that quite interesting there, where she says there's not a cure for cancer, basically. Yet, we're going to be chatting to Alan about cannabis oil, but if you look worldwide and just from a simple Google search, there's lots of alternative treatments to cancer. An Italian doctor, Dr. Simoncini, used bicarbonate of soda to cure various types of cancer, and he was struck off and banned from practicing in various countries for that. So there certainly is a lot of interesting information out there involving cancer, and we're going to get into it with Alan about cannabis oil in particular. So I'd like to welcome live from Toronto, Alan Park, to the programme. Good evening, Alan. Don't know what's going on here. All getting very confusing. I've built it up and everything, haven't I, there? Oh, staff. So, as I was just saying, we've got, there's various different interesting alternative treatments out there, and one thing I want to chat to Alan about when we get him on is the kind of response that he got from his doctors, his mainstream doctors, when he started to go into these alternative methods, if you like, because various people that have gone into those have got very, very bad responses from mainstream doctors. There was a case here in Britain of a family, actually in Southampton, a family who took their child out of the cancer unit of Southampton Hospital to take him over to, I believe it was Holland, to get some alternative treatment, and that was then treated as a criminal case. These parents were pursued by the police in order to kind of get him back. I believe we've got Alan on the line. Alan, are you there?
I am. Yes.
How are you? Good evening to you. Well, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon and good evening to your listeners in England. Nice to see you. Nice to hear you. Yeah, I've been listening to the show so far.
Yeah, it's great to speak to you. Obviously, we met a few weeks ago. We had a good chat about your experience and your story. So we just want to get a bit of a kind of rounded view of what's happened to you in the last few years. So should we start at the beginning? You sent me over an email yesterday saying that it kind of started in late 2013. So do you want to talk us through how everything began?
Sure. I like that the further this gets away, people are a little less apprehensive. When I was telling people about this a couple of years ago, as soon as you start talking about it, they're panicking that you're going to die in 5 minutes. So obviously the further out we get is good. But so 2013 was just a gradual deterioration in physical well-being, really. That's all it was. It was triggered, my awareness of it was triggered by pulling my rib in the gym. Using weights. It wasn't even the full weight that I want to use. You know, you have these gradual workup weights. You're not doing your full weight yet. It's a sort of building your way up, and that caused my rib to come out, and so I thought I had broken a rib. So and I went to the doctor and told him what was happening, and he said, yeah, well, you can't do much about that. You have to just bind it and live with it. And then 6 weeks or so later, it's still not any better. And in fact, maybe even the area that was originally injured was not so painful as much as some other areas that had opened up around the rib cage. So I went back to the doctor, and by the time I was aware that I wasn't healing from the rib injury was about 7 or 8 weeks later to be fully aware. Like, okay, none of that. I didn't heal at all in those 6 weeks from the end of January to the beginning of March. And then I started taking over-the-counter meds in March, April to get through the pain. And then I went to run some blood tests and urine tests to find out why I'm in such pain and a lot of hurting all over the place, like in my ankles and in my knees and lifting my legs to the point and where I'd be able to walk up and down the stairs comfortably. That was gone. It was just getting worse and worse, and they weren't finding anything. I still find that part of the story one of the most incredible parts. But anyway, by the time
that's a strange one.
I got, what's that?
I said that's a strange one considering
it is. Yeah. Considering, I mean, something's wrong, and you keep trying to figure it out. And I mean, there were markers now that I now know that I can't believe weren't called in. Like my age, for example, 50 at the time. They didn't start saying, well, maybe it's prostate cancer. They didn't go there. They didn't do that. They just kind of, I fell through the cracks. It can happen. So I'm not saying this to pull out the violin and boo-hoo me, although it was pretty sad at the time. But understand that if you're going through the medical system, and I'm not speaking to the specificities of the NHS in England because I don't know it, but if you're going through a series of things and tests and they're not finding anything, it's on you to try to get someone else in there to try to take a look and figure out what's going on. So that they didn't find it is one thing, that's just the way it all happened. I'm not really angry about it, although it's not something that should take place for anybody. No. So by the time I got to the end of November, I mean, I was just pushing through. I mean, I keep going to the doctor. They keep saying it's not this and that or the other thing. It should be okay, and probably this pain will go away sometime. And of course, it never did. And then I woke up on the 20th of November with it's a jarring memory, but it just felt like two construction rebar rods going through my lungs, just kind of lifting me up off the bed. And I thought, I can't do anything anymore. I have to go to the hospital. And so that was the beginning of that was the day that I found out. Later, at the end of the day, I found out that it was this terminal disease that would take no prisoners in my case.
What was their reasoning for, or justification, if you like, for how that hadn't been shown up when you've gone previous times?
There hasn't been a justification. I mean, you'd have to make some kind of legal case or some kind of malpractice suit, perhaps, and put that forward. I don't even know. I don't even. It wouldn't be worth chasing after for me personally. I don't think I'd want to get tangled up in that. But it's hard to say why. Is it anything to do with the expediency of the system? Just in, out, yeah, move on, whatever. Like, people don't care so much, the individual person. And you said victims earlier. You were right to say that. You corrected yourself. You said, oh, these cancer victims. We're victims. We are victims. And then you're a patient. But a patient and a victim of this particular disease is the same thing in my books.
Well, yeah, to me, the reason I say victim is because when there's so many treatments out there, as you've experienced yourself, and many others, that are not getting the funding, not getting the publicity, and not getting the traction that chemotherapy, radiotherapy is getting, I feel like people are victims because they're losing their lives when there's no need for them to.
Well, I've been making a big deal of this on my show. I have a show called Green Crush. You can find that on Google or on YouTube. And one of the things that really set me off once I started to get a lot of this learning done and finding out how to get out of my my certainty of death. And one of the things I found out was that in 2009, which is 4 years before I'm even afflicted or diagnosed, there's an article in a thing called cancerresearch.uk.org, cancerresearch.uk.org. And if you look in there, and maybe it's .co.uk.org, sorry. But if you look in there, there's a and I put it up on my show all the time, and you can find all that at Green Crush Pod. That'll tell you where everything is. But I put this article up because in 2009, there's an article that says that prostate cancer can be cured, is curable with cannabis oil, right? So I was very suspicious later on as to why my doctor, who said I had no option, and when he said that, he meant mainstream. There were no drugs, really. There was no surgery, radiation, or chemotherapy. And he just said, it's just going to end. That's it. But I don't understand how a top flight guy doesn't know this thing from 4 years ago. Because if that's my field, if I'm racing cars and you come up with a better engine than me or whatever, like I learn about the things that I'm involved in. And it's hard for me to see a top surgeon just go ahead and say, that's it, you don't have any options. But this is exactly what they've been doing, because I found another document, not a document so much as a story in The Guardian. Now, I know that sometimes the mainstream press is something we make fun of, but in the article in The Guardian from November 4th, 2001, they're saying that the anecdotal evidence regarding cannabis oil and healing people with illness is old news. It's no longer just anecdotal. Doctors are admitting it's a miracle. Testing has shown all kinds of good things. And from this, we need to move forward. This is a virtually buried article. I don't know how any country can go ahead and make rules and laws that are punitive regarding putting people away because it's a dangerous substance and blah, blah, blah. Meanwhile, here's this article from 16 years ago telling us all about. And that's an old article, This is the other thing. You're having me on your show now to talk about it. Mainstream publications never have on, unless I've never seen it, Raphael Mechoulam. This is the Israeli doctor who identified THC and CB1 and CB2 receptors, and he discovered that in 1963. Then they spent all of the 60s, him and his team and a bunch of other people, researching what marijuana, as they used to call it, cannabis, actually does. And by 1970, they had about 10 years of solid medical data going on right there saying, hey, this is really good for a lot of things. So what do you think the next logical move is? We bring it into the mainstream and we get everybody that's in, on healthcare to sort of understand how this application can be. We get it into patients. We get people turning around maybe 45 years ago. But instead of doing that, they just pretend like it's not on. Richard Nixon kicks off the drug war, and we're only now just starting to peel off the layers of restriction from that today, which is unbelievable to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I've just looked at that link you mentioned a few minutes ago, cancerresearchuk.org it was. And that's one of the biggest charities in Britain. Well, I thought they were a charity. But it says Cancer Research UK, a corporation. And I think that's kind of just triggered something for me. Cancer is a business. For the medical industry, it's worth billions year on year. And you're going to earn more by treating something, by getting people to keep going back, than you are from curing something. And it's a conversation you have quite a lot in a pub when you talk about cannabis. Not even necessarily from a medical point of view, but you talk about how many people that use it. And surely if it was legal and they taxed it, they'd make a hell of a lot more money than they do now like they do off alcohol, like they do off cigarettes. And
they compare it to alcohol and cigarettes when it's convenient for them, and then they don't compare it to alcohol and cigarettes later. Like, for example, the provincial Ontario government has just put out a bill recently. That proposal, I keep reminding people, I don't know why they think it's a done deal. It's a proposal, and sometimes when you get proposed to, the answer is no. That's where this belongs. But this proposal is, it doesn't take into account a lot of things. It's so flawed with even just regular logic. It's astounding. It's moving forward under the rubric of being sensible and being intelligent and moving forward. There's so many mistakes in this thing. You can't even believe it. Like, they're legislating that people have to stay home to consume their legal weed. And at the same time, you're not allowed to take it outside anywhere, just unless it's in your backyard or balcony. But then maybe your neighbor on the balcony doesn't like your smoking. So there's going to be that problem. There's so many constitutional flaws in this thing. But I have to go back to this article from 2001. That was the one you cited from 2009. This is in The Guardian, and it's in UK News. It's not even in the opinion section. It's in the news section. And it says, I'll just go through a couple of points here. It says it's a wonder drug capable of radically transforming the lives of very sick people, according to the results of the first clinical trials. Again, this is back in '01. Tests sanctioned by the government are proving far more successful than doctors, patients, and cannabis campaigners ever dared hope. Some of the patients are simply calling it a miracle. So here's a great idea. Let's stuff all of this information into a jar and ignore it the whole time. Over the last 16 years, dream up a series of ridiculous legislations that go against the rights of the people, that go against the free access of a plant that grows in sun and water, goes against all of that. And because it is going to cheapen the income, it will cheapen the income of the pharmaceutical companies. There's no way about it. There's no other way about it. This cannabis used to be a medicine that was used for all kinds of ailments. Now they have all kinds of medicines for one ailment. You know what I mean? So they've completely flipped the script on how to make money on these things. But I'd say it's a crime that you can't be going out there and making punitive cannabis legislation or any kind of legislation when there is tons of evidence to the contrary of what you're saying. So while they lament, oh, this is going to cost more in police costs, because they're the first people we had to consult before putting this thing through. I don't know why they don't talk to the users like myself, but we're always the last one on the list or never at all. But when they're pushing through this kind of thing, they say the costs will go up in the policing ledger, but they don't mention that if you're consuming this stuff on a proper basis, on a regular basis, as a food, as a fruit, in your smoothies, juiced as a liquid and put into ice cubes that you can put into drinks later, and you're taking this element into your body that, Jaymie, your body craves and needs. Okay, just like you need to get vitamin B12. So if you're if you're a vegetarian or vegan, you got to figure out a way to get B12. Or try spending your life without vitamin C. Or try spending your life without amino acids. You're going to head down to a place where you're getting sick and breaking down. And I think that this is at the root of so much of the illness of the peoples of the world, because this plant is in almost every country. And it's in an illegal situation almost everywhere. But if you had enough of this stuff going in, just like you've got enough B12 if you do eat meat, just like you do have enough vitamin C if you do take in enough citrus, you'd be well balanced and heading away from any kind of disease. Of course, you want to get a needle and get a flu shot. That'll fix it for you. But rather than doing that, just like treat your immune system with this one major key element that everyone is supposed to take into their bodies. And I put it to you that I wasn't doing that over the course of my life, and I wound up going down the cancer spiral, specifically prostate cancer spiral. Somebody else develops an autoimmune disease. Somebody else gets a IBS or some other kind of problem, all leading from the biological unit of the body not being able and allowed to take in enough nutrients. Just like they tell you to eat spinach and kale and all those wonderful green things. They arrived at those pieces of information, those knowledge points, because they studied those plants, and they know what kinds of amino acids and enzymes, etc., are in those plants. And if you put cannabis into the spinach, kale, lettuce group, you're not going to believe all the nutrition that's already in there that dwarfs all those other plants. Plus, you've got the full-on healing properties of the CB1 and 2 receptors that your body so normally craves. Of course, nobody gets it, and we all die of old age. I mean, you look at some people who are 45, 50 years old. You can't believe how old they look.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, it's just incredible. And I just think it all comes down to there's a massive suppression, not just on smoking a joint, but taking this stuff in. You get this stuff into you enough, you're not going to be sick. You're going to figure things out a lot better than you used to be able to figure out, and they don't want that. You're going to be harder to govern. It's going to be less expensive. It's going to shy away from the black market. All these things that we say we want to do in government, but of course now they're setting it up to parallel the black market system. So this is all done by suppression of old information and definitely an unwilling nature to carry on any nutritional or scientific research fully, properly in the open and in the mainstream and as fast as possible in the current day. So it's really coming at us from both ends here, unfortunately.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point to make as well. The amount of other benefits cannabis oil and cannabis has had on various other illnesses as well as just cancer. I remember reading a story here in Britain about somebody who had a skin condition who used cannabis oil by rubbing it rather than ingesting it. by rubbing it almost like a cream, and it had a massive benefit on that kind of condition as well. As you said, the amount of research that's gone into this, the amount of attention and the amount of money that's gone into this, the research, the fact that has not reached mainstream, there has to be a reason behind that. And you've touched on it there by saying they don't want people open, they don't want people healthy, because healthy people don't buy drugs, healthy people don't need the system, if you like. I've just found an interesting stat in front of me that every year now, $4.9 billion is raised for various cancer research charities worldwide. Yet with all that funding, they could use that funding for the extra police, couldn't they?
Yeah, they could. They could use it for that. They could just come to the truth and say, yeah, we don't really want to look at that, because here's the greater point. Right now it's an argument, and they bring this up all the time. What about the children? What will the children do? Well, that's just a one-issue topic, because while they're acting like they care about children, they're happier to cut the brain open of some kid to do a drastic brain surgery and leave a massive scar and like go in there with a sharp knife because we need to do this thing and remove this tumor. They won't put that same kid on cannabis oil before that, and leading to tumor shrinkage.
No,
they won't do that. They won't do that.
They'll give them Ritalin, though, won't they?
Because that's irresponsible, giving them a drug like that. But you're going to take a knife and cut his skull open and go into his brain and cut a piece out. I mean, that's astounding to me. They don't want the victory of this. And here's where it gets even more cool, if you think about it. If you allow it to be, let's call it a democracy thing. For example, in Canada, where most people want it to be a completely decriminalized thing. Everybody that uses it obviously wants that, and even a great deal of the people who don't use it want it to be free of government peril, free of going to jail or any kind of thing like that. So most people want this. They're not having it. They're still going to control it right down and treat it like a terrible substance. So they don't care about that. Then there's the dispensary model. We've had these dispensaries come up in Toronto, all across Canada, various different places where you can obtain this stuff. And they've all been raided and it's illegal and we can't have this. And, they're busting people and putting them in jail. And then the judges are getting so tired of these things, they're tossing them out. They're saying, get out of here. This is nonsense. But they're still arresting everybody. And the thing is like, I think ultimately, if you allow this thing to become like, maybe you'd be better at it, Jaymie, than selling it out of your local shop near a high street than I would be at mine, and I'd have to go out of business. Maybe the business model that they keep singing about all the time, that's supposed to be the greatest thing in the world, that we go to different countries and kill people for to make sure they get our fantastic way of life, right? Like, it's so ridiculous. They don't want to have a free market on this thing. They don't want to have a free understanding of this thing because it will drop the prices. They will lose their control on it. People will become more aware of their nefarious activities, but mostly they can't have the embarrassment of this once illegal, terrible, mind-numbing substance to become something that's like a healthful property that people do know how to use properly and can be shown how to use it properly. And then that also affects the economy in a positive way later on, and that actually reflects what people really want to do with the dispensaries. And this really does represent the reflection of the democracy. They don't want that. They don't want that at all. The last thing anybody needs who's part of the old guard is to say, hey, I used to make it illegal to access cannabis. Now I've just finally realized it's good for the economy, it's good for my health, it's good for everything, and I've been a chump standing on the sidelines for the last 10 or 15, 20 years of my political career saying it's a bad thing. It'll prove them to be. So what they've done is they've spent lots of time with the pressure of people wanting it to be legal and synthesizing this oppressive police state. So while people in Canada are saying, yay, finally it's going to be legalized pot. Legalese is a terrible word. You ever look at a contract? You ever go through a divorce? You look at all that legalese. Legalizing is not so great. Decriminalizing is everything, but legalizing it is just putting a series of spiderweb rules around it. And we got a real love for that in Canada. So they love passing more rules and living by them like you don't know. It's some kind of national disease here.
Yeah, I noticed that when I was there a couple of weeks ago. It's a very law-abiding country, isn't it?
Yeah, and they want more laws. There aren't enough. God, we need more laws every year. But it's amazing to me because what it comes down to is total ignorance on the part of the people And they're dreaming up these education programs. Coming soon, we're having the education program about cannabis. Thing number one in the health community board is don't use it. Number one is abstinence. Don't use it. Okay, so these are the people that are going to be in charge of education, government education programs. They haven't written any yet. They've released. I can't wait to see these indoctrination programs that completely ignore the testimony of people like myself. They completely ignore the facts that are in this article from 2001. It even says in the 2001 article, previously, this kind of, I don't know exactly what it is, but basically I'm paraphrasing it. Previously, this kind of thing used to be known as anecdotal, but we now realize it's not anecdotal. But meanwhile, in the last 16 years, all kinds of people have been saying it's just anecdotal. Like they're still believing the old fairy tale. You know, it's like when they put a story out on page 1 and 3 days later the retraction is a paragraph on page 56, you know.
Yeah, that's,
everybody
remembers
the headline.
It sums up the mainstream media, as you mentioned, that we laugh at, that you're coming on an alternative show like this to talk about an amazing story like you've got, something that, a disease that in Britain anyway, 1 in 3 people are affected by, and the fact that you're talking to somebody who's cured themselves with an alternative form of treatment that's not in the mainstream, the fact that BBC One, the mainstream press are not all over that sort of sums up where we are as a mainstream media. If you're just tuning in, we've got Canadian comedian Alan Park on the line. He's got a fascinating story to tell us about his treatment of cancer with cannabis oil. I've got a couple of tweets that we've had in for you, Alan. Charlotte tweets, her friend was diagnosed with breast cancer. Have you got any advice re oil? She's just about to start chemo.
I do have advice, and the way I always cover my advice is I never tell anyone what to do. You know, like I don't tell you to go get your hair cut or what to eat for dinner. So what I say is, gee whiz, if that happened to me, here's what I would do, and then I think that sort of covers it. Yeah. But this what's the name of the caller again?
Charlotte,
I'm sorry to hear that news, first of all, and I'm sorry that just about everybody in Britain everybody's affected by it. Well, it's 1 in 3. I think it's 1 in 2 now, maybe in North America. You've either got it or you know someone that does. So I'm sorry that happened to her. I really believe, like I said earlier, in the maintenance program of ingesting this plant. And it's hard. How do you get enough plants to put in your salads and eat this as a food? I recommend doing that, first of all, 10, 20, 30 years ago. I recommend your mother eating it in her salads so that when you're breastfeeding, it's going right into your immune system from day one. I'd love to see a generation. We could have had a generation of kids like that from 2001 forward, but this oppressive, this removal of the information. But to get specifically to your point, there are a couple of websites I'm going to reference, and I think you should go there immediately. And you should study them, because you need to look at every page and you need to watch every video on these 2 sites. Now listen, there are a lot of good websites, I'll give you that, but these are the 2 that really got me going onto, hey, this is something, and got me pointed in another direction. So before I even talk to anybody personally about this, I ask them to please go to these sites, and have nothing to do with me personally, but they're just a treasure trove of information. So write this down. Hopefully you've been looking for a pen or something, or maybe you're going to write it in your phone while I'm killing time here. But so basically, here are the 2 websites. Okay, of course, they both start off with www, and then it's cureyourowncancer.org. Cureyourowncancer.org, and that's an American website, and lowercase, one word, cureyourowncancer.org. Go check that out. It's amazing. And there's a guy there who really got cancer, really didn't want to do the cannabis oil because he was really like a straight-laced, regular kind of guy, until another fellow who's a great researcher activist named Justin Kander, Kander. He's on Facebook. Look him up. He's a very smart young guy talking about all these wonderful medical cannabis applications. Justin Kander got this guy, Dennis Hill, to do this, based on the fact that Dennis Hill is like I think he's a biologist. He's like a bryologist of some sort. So he's already using microscopes, etc. He's already into that field. And so that was enough to get this guy who had cancer to track it as his own profession would have him track it. And then he came to the conclusion, a microbiologist of some nature, he came to the conclusion it's all on his website, cureyourowncancer.org, came to the conclusion that, this application of oil was literally crushing the cancer, literally crushing it out of existence. And then after a little while, he got it back. Turns out he got the cancer back about 2 years later. And, that's when you go to your second round of chemo usually, and it's harder to come back. Every time the cancer comes back and you go do another round of chemo, it's harder each consecutive time. And that's why 2-3 times down the road, maybe it wasn't the cancer that killed you. Maybe it was the third application of chemo you couldn't deal with. Hey, I never think about it that way.
Yeah.
But this oil is made, you can do it yourself. You can learn how to make it on either one of these two sites. And I'm going to tell you the other one in a second. And you can make it yourself. Now, you'd have to obtain good quality cannabis marijuana for that. And I have a joke about that. I say, look, I know you're all freaked out. You don't know where to find a pound of cannabis that's any good. That's easy. You go to a police evidence storage locker. And you better hurry up, because by Friday afternoon, there's only about an ounce left. So you need to obtain that. That's your thing. I don't know how you're going to do that. I'm sure it's doable in England someplace, and you can make your own. That would be the quickest, easiest way to do it, is to get good quality bud and then make your own and go to these websites, and they'll show you how to do it. Otherwise, there are some other purveyors over there, but you need to be careful that you're getting the THC in and the CBDs in. Let's not go to this moral argument about how, well, it'd be so much better if we could just take the THC out, and then I wouldn't be all having these crazy dreams and everything. It's all part of the journey, okay? It's all part of it. And if you're really reacting against the psychoactive nature of cannabis, you don't have enough of it in your system in the first place. That's the inversion property here. The inversion factor. You don't have enough of it in your body in the first place, so when you take it in, you immediately get high. If you fill the levels up where they're supposed to be, you can add more, but you won't get high. It's like putting more than 8 ounces of liquid into an 8-ounce cup. You're just going to keep pouring and pouring and pouring. It's going to fill over the edges. It's not going to be more. You're going to just still have 8 ounces in the glass. So you need to get this oil in the regular amount of a gram a day and work your way up to it. There's all this information is on that site, cureyourowncancer.org. The other website being, this is the second one, from the Canadian Rick Simpson. He has a website called phoenixtears.ca, PHOENIX tears, TEARS.ca. And Rick is the Canadian guy that somehow in the early aughts, 2001, 2, 3, couple of years after this Guardian article, was able to get rid of cancer within himself here in Canada. Figured this out, this recipe, this means of extracting from one plant down to 60 grams of oil spread into 90 days of intake, and it pulls you out of trouble. But he figured this out. Then he started helping people in Canada, apparently by the thousands. I don't know. I haven't spoken to him yet. He's a rather elusive fellow because they basically chased him out of this country. This terrible man who helped tons of people shun their cancer. This guy took people through at his home someplace in Canada and gave this stuff to them because he was growing it. And he would just make it up, and, he could make up a whole batch, a lot all at once, and square it off. He was giving it to people who no longer have cancer. And the legal saga is not, I don't have it entirely at my fingertips, but the end of the deal is he managed to escape incarceration or prison, and then somehow or other has wound up living in Croatia. That's what we did with our fantastic cancer killer. We made him live somewhere else in exile.
Well, the same thing happened to Dr. Simoncini in Italy, who used bicarbonate of soda as a form of treatment for cancer and had amazing results as I was using that. Yeah. And he got chased out, got struck off in America, and has been, I think he's practicing out of China now. But anyone that kind of puts their head above the water, and obviously Rick Simpson's kind of the face of the cannabis oil treatment for cancer, isn't he? He's the most well-known person that's done it.
He is. He's the guy. My hat's off to him. I wouldn't be sitting here without him. 100%.
Well, that kind of brings us around to my next question, actually. I'll just read out this amusing tweet. Gail tweets, "It's a natural plant. There's more dangerous chemicals in a tampon."
Sure. Yeah, there are more. Yeah, you never hear of anybody getting toxic shock from smoking a joint. But yeah, that's true. That is true. There are more. That's an amazing story. I never really thought about that until I was about 25 years old. But the whole notion of all of the stuff that goes into those things.
Oh, it's madness. It's madness. Yeah. That's why the box is so big. I just want to come back to your story in particular, because I think it's for people listening, it's an amazing opportunity to speak to somebody like Charlotte, who tweeted in, to hear from somebody who's actually got a personal experience and a really positive personal experience of this.
Yeah.
So if we can go back to late November 2014,
sure. Okay.
What was your experience of cannabis prior to being diagnosed? Did you used to use it recreationally, or so you had an experience of it previous to that? And that's...
Oh yeah, sure. I was 50 when I was diagnosed. The first time I used it, I used it incorrectly, and I used it when I was in what we call high school here. So I was probably 15 years old, I guess. First time I used it, something like that. And because of the repression, because of the illegality of it, because of treating it as a criminal substance, you then create the darkness and the negativity that surrounds that thing that we all know everyone's going to eventually get. You can't legislate these things out of existence. So had I known about it properly, had I used it properly, and not from some indoctrination program, but yeah, I had smoked cannabis throughout my life, off and on. When I got to my early 30s, I was realizing that my cannabis intake at the time was completely ill-advised for me, because I was getting ideas and coming up with things. I'm a comic, so I would, you'd get high with some other comics, you think of some funny stuff, and in my own personal case, I realized that I wasn't actually moving forward with any of these, fancifully arrived at plans or what have you. So I stopped using it. It was just a recreational thing for me solely and entirely. I didn't realize about smoking wasn't as good as vaping. I didn't even know about vaping. I don't even think vaping was around back then. But I did have the knowledge, and I had used it. And I had played around with it a little bit one more time about 10 years before that. And I just said, no, Are you still there?
Yep, yeah, I am, yeah.
Are you still there?
I am. Can you still hear me?
Are you still there?
Still hear me?
Oh, okay. Sorry. It sounded like a drop right.
No,
yeah.
No problem. I just dropped the mic down.
So,
I took off.
So when I got to the point of, sorry, you're cutting. I'm not sure if I'm on or.
Yep, you're still on.
Okay. So when I was, I'm not sure where I left you now, but basically I had used it and I did know what it felt like, and so the very first time I started to use it in the medical turnaround, which was the night of the 23rd of November, 2013, that was my first time using it, like with the hopes of using it to pull me out of trouble. And that I smoked a joint. I smoked half a joint with someone who sold me 1/4 of the amount, 1/4 of 1 pound. You eventually need a pound, but I couldn't afford that, and it's a bigger process to cook it up like that and everything. So I did it in a 1/4 pound capacity, and so but on the night that I bought it, on the Saturday, I wound up smoking a half a joint, and that felt actually pretty good. I actually had a pretty good positive reaction in the bathroom. There was almost an instant feeling better and a release of some stuff in me, fluids and liquids that were always having a tough time coming out with this late stage prostate cancer. And all of a sudden I smoked half a joint and a bunch of stuff came out and I felt at ease and I was feeling really nice, even though I was a few days into this terminal diagnosis. And the next day I made the oil, and then I took a little bit, the size of the head of a pin. Right. I took that much on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, the size of a head of a pin, and all of a sudden on Thursday morning when I went to take my regular morphine pill, I realized, hey, I'm not actually in pain. Maybe don't take the morphine. And I haven't taken any since that time until my second crash. And then that was a whole other saga.
So when you stand in front of a doctor and a doctor says to you, you've got 10 to 12 months to live, I mean, that's an experience that nobody wants to go through.
No.
What was your reaction, given your knowledge of cannabis and the cannabis oil? Was it sort of a, no, right, I'm going to walk out of here and I'm going to cure this on my own? Or how did that genuinely feel?
Mm-hmm. So I was diagnosed on the 20th of November. And that was a Wednesday. And then they said that this doctor would be getting a hold of me really soon to set up another follow-up appointment with an expert, because I'd only been diagnosed by the emergency room attending doctor, you know.
Right.
And they just tell you what you have. They don't tell you how you're going to battle it or what kind of drugs you might use or what's the plan going to be. They just say, here's your problem. This guy will get a hold of you later. So they didn't call the next day or Friday or the following Monday or the Tuesday. But on the following Wednesday, a week later, they called up and set an appointment for, I think it was, I never really remember this one. I need to look it up in my all my papers that I've got with all this whole story. But basically, it was between Christmas and New Year's of that year. So 5 weeks away, 5 weeks down the road from this terminal diagnosis. And that's key. That is a key point, because there I was getting diagnosed. Within 3 days, I start using the oil. Within 3 more days, I don't need pain relief anymore, and I'm regaining my mobility, and I'm feeling better and having a better time of things. And I can tell that by the time I go see this guy. Okay, by the time I go see this doctor. So his first thing was looking over all my work. Basically, to him, all he thinks is, okay, this guy came to emerge 5 weeks ago, and now he's here. And so I'm clearly going to be the same terrible state or worse.
Yeah.
So he looks at my 700, and he's scratching his head, and, you know, I'm trying to be as chipper as possible to put a positive spin on the whole thing. And he says, I don't understand how you can have a 700 here, because we tested you today and it's only a 374. Now, that's not exactly half, but it's pretty close. It's still a terrible number. You never want a 374 PSA. You don't want anything more than 3 or 4. Right. But it was about half. And what he didn't understand was, like, I should have been at least at 700 or 7202 or 710, or even have doubled. Because oftentimes when it gets to crazy town like that, it just doubles out. You know, you go from 200 to 400, 400 to 800, that kind of thing. So it could literally have been 1,400. It could have been 1,000 or 1,100 or something. But what he didn't understand was how it could be lower. And he was saying that. Like, he was sitting there at the desk, you know, with me sitting there, meeting him for the first time. And he's going, I'm not comfortable with this at all. I don't understand these numbers. I mean, it doesn't make sense to me at all. And I'm sitting there thinking, I know exactly why that is. The only wild card here is I'm taking this oil for 5 weeks, and this guy doesn't know that, right? That's the only way. That's the only thing different. That's why he's at the top of his game, scratching his head and going crazy. And I didn't tell him, because I didn't feel like it was a good plan to tell him. Why tell him? Who cares? So I let it sit for a while. And he's going over it, and I said, no, that is definitely correct. I was definitely in far more pain and agony when I came in at the 700, and I do feel a lot better now, so I believe those numbers. And he's like, okay, well, I don't know. I mean, maybe we should do this one again. And then we went through the rest of the meeting, and he's telling me what he can and can't do for me, and basically couldn't do anything. He could only give me what's called a hormone suppressant, to prevent my own body's production of testosterone, because when you have prostate cancer, that's the fuel. Just like probably a lot of the female cancers, such as breast cancer and uterine cancer, etc., the fuel is estrogen, yeah. Right? So I have to kill this production of this, but he's still saying, like, we'll do that. That'll just slow things down for you, and I'd give you, like, he said, about 10 or 12 months, and the last several months of which aren't really going to be any kind of fun. So that's super grim. And so by the time we got to the end of this half-hour thing, go ahead and ask your question, but by the time we got to the end of this half-hour thing, he put his hand on my shoulder, and he said, I'm so sorry. There's nothing else that can be done. And Jaymie, there was a certain energy and a certain rhythm and a certain timing of all of the things he was saying and all of the things I was saying and all the things he was saying. And it's kind of going back and forth in a rhythm, you know? And so to answer your question, when he said that thing to me, he's got about 10 or 12 months to live, and I said, wow, that's such a short amount of time or something like that. And he said, well, I know this is the hardest part of my job. It's hard for me to tell people this is going to happen. We do have counselors here at the hospital. We do have priests and people of a religious persuasion if you need to talk to them. This is always difficult, et cetera, et cetera. And I just shut everything down. I just stopped the flow, the back and forth, the rhythm. I changed the game. I changed the energy, right? Just like you can change the energy if you all of a sudden swear, or you all of a sudden are going really fast and go really slow. You're changing the energy.
Yep.
And I brought it right down, and I said to him, because I was feeling better. I could tell things had been going on for weeks now, 2 or 3 weeks of like, wow, this is incredible. I really am in better shape than I was in all of November and all of October. And I said to him, so what you're telling me is there's nothing I can do to get out of this. There's nothing else I can do. Is that right? And he takes a second. This is where the whole energy shift changed and everything. And he goes, no, I'm afraid not. And at that moment, I could tell he was incorrect. Now, I don't know if he was lying to me at that time. I don't know if he's trying to manipulate me at that time. I don't know what the hell he's doing. But I could just feel that even though he said the answer was no, I knew the answer was yes. I could just tell by, I don't know, I can't even quantify it. And then I have lots of people telling me, that's bullshit, you're all making it up. And once again, I tell them, hey, I'm still sitting here. Like you said in the intro of your show, obviously I didn't die. That's verifiable. I didn't die December 2014. Although I am looking forward to celebrating my 3rd funeral anniversary coming up on this. So, it's pretty fun. But I don't know where I got the notion, but the whole energy changed, and he said no, and it was a weak no. You know, like if you catch somebody lying and Jimmy, did you knock over the thing and break the cat's tail? And Jimmy goes, no. But meanwhile, he did do it. You can tell he's not on top of it, right?
Yeah,
even if he's not sure exactly why he didn't do it. But I knew it. And so with this cannabis oil going, and I knew this, I just kept pounding it out.
So in a way, that meeting or that appointment was actually quite positive, because it was also confirmation, not that only that you were feeling better, that the PSA levels had almost halved.
Yeah,
I suppose you wouldn't
huge
have,
boost.
You wouldn't have known.
Real mental booster for sure.
Yeah, I suppose you wouldn't have known that without going there, and then to see that's the thing with the mainstream doctors, is it's challenging their system and their rhetoric of how you treat these things, and when they can't explain it, they don't like
that's it. Go ahead. Sorry,
I was saying when they can't explain it, they don't like it.
No, in fact, so then many months go by, and I keep on improving, and I keep getting better, and now we're into May or June of 2014. You know, just right at the point where I'm supposed to be getting into the place where, and it's not going to be so fun at the end. I'm doing fantastically well, and he keeps remarking on every monthly visit that I go in for to test blood and all those things, and he says, like, this is incredible. You're doing so well. So finally, I drop the bomb. I say, well, I think the reason I'm doing so well is because I've been taking cannabis oil regularly. And this is where I knew I was in for a fight. Right as soon as I say that, his face falls down. He says, oh, I don't think that's a good idea. I would recommend against that. And I just think that's nuts. Madness. On its face. You know, I just completely bonkers at that time.
Well, that sums up mainstream medicine. You've seen a guy who's walked in. He's had his PSA levels at 700. You've seen him in his next appointment. They've almost halved. And he must have known in that appointment that there was some reason for that.
Yeah.
And then you've seen constantly this guy get better and better and stronger, and he's told you why. And you've turned around and said, I'd advise you against that and do what I say, which is, I can't do anything for you. I mean, that sums up mainstream medicine.
And it sums up the mainstream mindset, because I've been on some other shows. I was on Richie's show about 2 years ago on a different day, I guess. And the thing that really blows my mind is when I started to go public with this and talk about this, and I didn't have any choice in that matter. But when I started to talk about all of this stuff, people would even get angry and say to me, like, this is irresponsible what you're saying. You should listen to your doctor. And at that point you go, well, that guy's indoctrinated because I did listen to my doctor and he told me I don't have any options. And so I figured one out. Like, how much do I need to listen to my doctor? By taking his advice where there's nothing I can do and just go away and go into pain and just go ahead and die? Like, how many people are actually programmed at that point? Because that's where I'm at now. I'd like to go back to this guy who, you know, he knows why I haven't seen him in the past couple of years is because I'm dead. because he knows that. Because he knows that's how much time I had. And so all of a sudden, one day I stopped going to see him. And he knows that's because I died. Now, I haven't even gone back to this guy. But I'd like to call up the office, rebook an appointment, go back in there. And he'll be a bit surprised to see me. And I just want to ask him, remember when you said there's nothing I can do to avoid a 2014 Christmas time funeral? Well, I'm still here. So you need to explain exactly all of the backing and all of the science and all of the everything that you told me to stop doing this, number one. Explain why I'm still here, number one. Number two, have you been telling other men in this pickle there's nothing they could do? Because unlike me, I'll bet you a lot of guys believe it when the doctor says, listen, there's nothing you can do. You got 10 or 12 months. You'll be gone by the end of Halloween or Christmas kind of thing. You'll be gone by then. And I think a lot of people go, oh, my God. Oh, geez, there's nothing I can do. And then they call their wife if she's not there. And then they start themselves ticking down the internal clock to match what the doctor says as best as possible. Because they know the doctor went to school for 8 or 10 years. They know he's an expert. They know he does this every day. And it's just like a guy that doesn't know how to fix his car. And he's got a transmission problem. He doesn't know how to fix it. He takes it into the doctor. He takes it into the garage. The garage fixes it, and he drives away. He doesn't know how to fix it. And if the guy at the garage says, you're toast, that's it. Well, maybe some other guy knows how to fix a transmission. It doesn't take the word of the guy at the garage, So I think it's the same thing with, like, you tell a guy, hey, here's the data. Here's my degrees on the wall. Here's my long white coat, sort of like a priest, but the other color. And what I'm telling you is, from everything I've learned, there's nothing you can do about this. So go home and get your affairs in order. And I'm so sorry. And you know what? This is the worst part of my day when I got to tell a guy this. Gee whiz. Anyway, off to lunch. That's it. That's it. And I didn't go down that way, but I know lots of people must have. They take the word of the doctor. There's nothing you can do, and they go. It's like casting a spell at that point. And it literally is. You're telling someone, it's so easy to cast a spell. So many people make a big deal about it, like, oh, you believe in witches or whatever. But if I say to you, guy, man, that's a ridiculous kind of haircut you're going. It doesn't go with your shirt at all. And what's that green stuff in your teeth? All of a sudden, you're spun around. You don't know what's going on. You're checking your hair. You're looking at your teeth. You're in the mirror. I just put a spell on you. So it's the same. The spell is nothing more than putting words and letters together. So when you tell a guy, you're going to die, there's nothing you can do, you had better be accurate about that, right?
Yeah.
You had better be accurate about that, because this guy just discarded my life, and I went about things another way, and I still have my life. It's a different life altogether, but it's better than being gone, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I guarantee the vast number of people that guy would have said very similar things to won't have gone down these alternative routes and probably did die in the time that he said. It's amazing how many people do die in the time frames that they're given, and a lot of that has to be perception. And like you just said, it's you tick down an alarm clock, you expect it to happen, so it does happen.
Because the mind is going. The mind is going. This guy has gone to school. He does this as a living. This is a great. He makes a lot of money doing this. I don't know anything about medical things. And I've been hurting, and I've got a problem, and he just told me what it is, so he must know everything, so I totally believe everything he's got to say. Yeah. And so that means if he says next year, the body and the mind, maybe you go a little bit earlier than that. Maybe you go a little bit later, but you're still going.
Absolutely.
You literally have to sign on to the program.
Yeah, all doctors are when they say I've learnt this, it's just repeating what they've been told by drugs companies and by medical school. It's never actually research yourself that they've done themselves, really. So we're going to take a short ad break now, and we get
sure.
We'll keep Alan on after the break. You're listening to Jaymie Icke's Friday Night. Back shortly.
There's a place high in the mountains of Spain, a sanctuary where souls gather from all around the globe to learn about themselves and experience powerful changes in the way we see our world. They become awakened to their gifts and their power to heal others. Become part of this ever-growing worldwide family of unique, pure energy healing practitioners. Discover how amazing you truly are. Go to www.markbayerski.com. It could just change your life forever.
Is your mind full of ideas, yet you struggle to put them down on paper? characters with no home, unfinished concepts that you always wanted to finalize, yet lacked knowledge and drive to complete. The Creative Writing course from Creative Imaginings may be the long-awaited answer, designed to help you finish your masterpiece with better language techniques, detailed study of the character, plotted suspense chain, and valuable information to get published. Don't delay your creation. Sign up today. Email Sue on nasusproductions@gmail.com.
Have you lost access to important data from a computer hard drive, mobile phone, or other storage device? Maybe you have a broken hard drive containing years of information, or a smartphone that no longer works from which you'd like the pictures, movies, and chats recovered. If you would like to recover data from any type of digital device, including desktop and laptop computers, external hard drives, cameras, smartphones, NAS, and RAID servers, then contact Data Clinic today at dataclinic.co.uk now.
Introducing the H2o App, a powerful water structuring application that programs vibrational energies into water through the use of different sound frequencies. Once programmed, the use of water for drinking, cooking, bathing. Give it to your friends and colleagues or spread it around the garden. The list goes on. It's not just water that the app can be used for either. It's great for programming crystals too. The H2o app is free to download and is available on both Android and Apple platforms. For further information, go to h2oapp.online.
You're listening to the Friday Night Show with Jaymie Icke.
Welcome back to the programme. You're listening to Friday Night with Jaymie Icke. Live on the show, live from Toronto, we've got Canadian comedian Alan Park. He's been on with us for about the last hour, talking about alternative cancer treatments, predominantly cannabis oil. So we've spoken about quite a lot so far, from your personal experience to also the responses you've had and the responses that other people have had to this kind of thing. So you've got a radio show called Green Crush, which you go into these topics and speak to. I guess you speak to people and other people like yourselves that have got personal experiences from that. Do you want to talk us through that?
Yeah, sure. So in the initial stages of all this being terrible, and there's one way to go at it comedically is to just, you get your diagnosis and then you head to the comedy club and talk about it, and then 3 days later something else happens and your colostomy bag breaks and you go and talk about that. I didn't want to do any of that. I wanted to focus all my energy on turning this thing around, and I thought I did that in the end of by late 14. But by April 14, I thought it was all done. And unfortunately, at the beginning of 15, I slipped back down, and there were reasons for that, including an less than efficacious batch of cannabis that I was using as medicine, while it seems the cancer was coming back. But I've really figured out a lot of things now, and I understand the biological reasons, I understand the mental and spiritual reasons, and I can talk about it until the cows come home, and it's helped a lot of people already. So what I wanted to do was, I realized I was talking to people for like 5, 6, 8 hours at a time. They'd be asking me questions and interested to hear, but you eventually run out of time. I can't spend 5, 6 hours talking to one person at a time. So as a performer, I decided to put all of this into a podcast, and the podcast is on YouTube, it's on iTunes, it's all over the place, it's on the various podcasty platforms. It's even on some platforms I never heard of if you do a Google search. But right. This thing is basically, I talk for about an hour and 15, 20 minutes, and sometimes with a guest and sometimes not, but it's about using the cannabis as basically Green Crush is this, as I say. The green is the cannabis. The crush is that the cannabis crushes cancer. And it also provides access and awareness to the science and the history that helps prevent police protection from accessing the cannabis. So that's the other part of the Green Crush. We have different topics on the show like cops or truth, no opioids, which means say no to opioids, best buds, which is basically the section where I speak with people who've gone through hell themselves. They're pals of mine, and their anecdotal advice hopefully can help other people understand that it doesn't always have to be the end of the line. Different topics on the show. We have a topic on Blinded Me with Science, and I find lately a lot of these swirl into the same things. But if you just go to YouTube and in the search box, put in Green Crush and Allen Park, ALANPARK. You'll see the shows now. We've had a fair. The first 6 shows did okay, and then 7, 8, 9 have really spiked a lot, and 10 is also up in that area. I don't even know whereabouts right now, but the cool thing is that it's not just on YouTube, but YouTube is an easy place to find it in the first place. You can also go to @GreenCrushPod, POD. @GreenCrushPod. That'll tell you where we are on Facebook and Twitter and all of the different places. But we're getting the word out that this stuff is very, very helpful to the body in general. And I'm just basically trying to be the counterpoint to the lies and the suppressions of truth that come from our benefactor, the old nanny state.
Absolutely. And it's amazing for people to have somebody, I've mentioned this a few times, to have somebody who's had a personal experience of it, to actually be able to talk to, get advice from, and you're living proof that it works. Absolutely living proof that it works.
I am, and there are more of me out there. I just happen to have a big mouth. And I told this cancer, this is something you can do. I did this. I don't know where it came from. I think it just came from the cannabis awareness. Like, you do get crazy ideas, and they do come from other places. And by that I just mean it's not stuff you normally think of. But I came across the idea at one point to anthropomorphize the cancer itself. In other words, the gal who was talking earlier, who's concerned about breast cancer, and her friend, and everybody's mom and anybody else, try to think of this cancer as an aggressor in a human form or in some kind of humanoid form. So here's what I did. I didn't like the way it just sneaks in. I mean, I spent most of the year 2013 not knowing what was going on. It's just this cowardly, sneaky, terrible thing that just kind of shows up, and it's too late to do anything about it, or it's going to be a big battle to do anything about it. And I don't like the way it's sneaky, and it's like you're walking through a fog and you don't really know anything. Well, one of the bags of tricks that I used were mental visualization techniques. It's not just cannabis. It's that the cannabis helps you find other things. It literally does things to your body, but it also does things to your brain, and good things, thanks. Enough with the song and dance from the upset cops. Okay, they don't know what they're talking about. Where everybody over there's got 100 IQ, all right? They shouldn't be setting government policy when you're giving it to the cops. A chief cop is only a little bit smarter than a 100 IQ regular cop. Why go to them 100% across the board when they're going to bring this stuff in? But what I'm saying is this oil also makes you come up with ideas, and one of the ideas I got was anthropomorphize this thing. So I basically visualized my cancer as a great big aggressor, huge, furry boots, dirty, stinking, sneaking guy that I could literally look at and see. And I made him way bigger than me. I made, because you don't want to make it like unrealistic, like it's nothing, like a fly on your arm when you're trying to have a soup. I mean, I made it big, but then I could see it, right? I could literally take a look at it, and I could imagine myself kind of going in and around the back of the legs and taking shots out of its ankles and calves and type of thing. You need to visualize this thing as an actual aggressor that you can sort of counter navigate. And then you don't even go to war like they say. Go to war. You got to go to war with cancer, war on cancer. We're going to start this battle. We're going to start this war. We're going to bring out the big guns. We're going to blast it out with this and that. We're going to cut it out with radiation. We're going to slash that thing. We're going to burn it out with, all that thing. And we're going to poison that thing with chemo. We're going to burn that. How about this? Forget all of that. Forget all of that going to war stuff. That's not the methodology you're supposed to use for cancer.
A war needs two sides.
What's that?
A war needs two sides.
A war needs two sides.
It's resistance.
Exactly.
It's resistance that causes conflict.
So here's what I did. I treated it by treating myself. So when we hear the word cure, and you mentioned at the beginning of the show, I understand where that's all coming from, but this really is about semantics, because the words have vibrations and the things have meaning beyond what people understand. But what I did was I didn't go after the disease specifically. Once I got it into a face and a body, I was like, okay, I can see that thing. But I didn't go after it per se, like, I'm going to kill you. I just needed to be able to keep an eye on it, to understand what was going on. And what happened was, slightly and gradually over time, this disease that you're trying to kill, in the beginning, I realized I don't need to kill the disease. I just need to make my body into such a state that disease cannot take hold, and it just falls off. Like if you tried to put a Velcro thing on a piece of glass and you've made what was a rough surface area into a piece of glass, all of a sudden that disease with the latches, it doesn't hold on anymore. So I'm not treating the damaged tomatoes in my garden by trying to fix them with special sprays and drugs and chemicals and cutting them out. I go, that's just a symptom of the problem. And the problem is that the soil is screwed up. There's maybe some kid poured a thing of paint down there, or maybe it's too close to the road and it's picking up a lot of car exhaust. And that's why you're having a problem with your tomatoes. So what I've done with the oil is, and how it's a nutritive property that stimulates your immune system from the tip to the bottom. That's the whole thing. That's what it's doing. And if that's working, then that means it's stimulating your brain. It means you're oiling up parts of your brain you don't even think about.
Yeah, absolutely.
The cerebellum and the pituitary and the pineal and all that stuff that they say, it's not a big deal. But meanwhile, you know it's a big deal because they're working that amygdala, that fear receptor center like crazy 24/7. We got a nuclear bomb. We got a war going on in the States, the race war, and we've got a nuclear war going on, and all the financial things going to collapse. And watch the news tonight. And Donald Trump said this. It's like constant craziness to get you so upset. They're playing that amygdala in your brain like it's a dinner triangle, like, come on, ding, 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 soup's on, let's go. They're playing that thing in all of us because they know that thing can be played. But as soon as you start actually using the other parts of your brain, and the oil that's being used to pull yourself out of trouble is also going up and down in your brain and your immune system and everywhere else.
Well, it's keeping
Pardon?
So I was saying it's keeping people in a low vibrational state of awareness as well, isn't it? It's fear is a very low vibrational energy. It's a horrible feeling to feel scared, to feel that fear and anxiety, and you only got to turn on the television news, and there's very few positive stories that give you uplifting things. It's all negative. It's all frightening. It's all doom and gloom, and there's nothing that treats the other side of you, which is the positive, imaginative.
Right.
It's all
negative. Yeah, and that's how I could tell that this whole thing was a scam, because for them to they must be deliberately focusing on that amygdala that interprets fear that way and sort of runs your life. They don't really want to focus on the other aspects of how well that brain is affected. But what you're doing simply with this oil is you're conditioning your body to understand this nutrient that you were supposed to have anyway. And by the time you're using the oil, it's kind of like the jaws of life. The car thing, that you guys have that over there? It's like a big vice grip, huge piece of mechanical equipment, like a mini crane. And it'll just tear a car apart like a can opener to get the person out. To save the person in the burning car crash. It just cuts everything apart, just like putting a tin can inside a pair of scissors. That's called the jaws of life. They use it in terrible road accidents, and that's kind of what the oil is. You're at this point where you're done. You're finished. It's over. You've got nothing but terrible news. You're stage 2, 3, 4 cancer, whatever it is. You're not coming back. The oil simply changes the makeup, the pH makeup, the blood makeup in your body to be at a place where this disease can't latch on. You're okay. You don't have dis-ease. You have ease. That's all it is. You're just reconditioning your garden properly with the proper stuff, and you don't worry about the tomato plant that you lost. That's okay. Another one will grow. The main thing is that the actual dirt in the garden is in good shape, and your body is the dirt in the garden, of course, in this analogy. And are you still there?
Absolutely. Sorry, Richie's just dropped me down then.
Okay. So that's what it is. But seriously, I mean, this is all it is. You're just reconditioning your body with the proper nutrients that you're supposed to have. You guys are big guys. You probably ate your peas and your potatoes and your meats. So you're supposed to take everything into your life. Or the next thing you know, you're going to have Morgan Freeman telling you what a bad idea it is.
I know. I can't cope with that. Just to
Hey, I love to think about Morgan Freeman. You're so funny that Morgan Freeman would come out and do a narration, because he's got the favorite narration voice whatsoever. Everybody loves Morgan Freeman doing narration on something. So the CIA goes out and gets him to do this thing. They pay him a bunch of money. He's 80 years old. He sits down and reads this thing. It's a friggin' movie script.
It is, absolutely.
they're not going to talk to him about it. They're not going to talk to him personally. They're just going to say this stuff. And somehow everybody goes, oh, that's okay. Remember when they they said, oh, the CIA says that the Russian thing with Trump and blah, blah, blah. The CIA said, when did we start believing them? When I was going to high school, everybody knew they were a dirty spy outfit, supposed to be operating outside of the states, but of course they operate inside the states all the time. They've got Operation Mockingbird going back in the 40s when they infiltrated into every kind of news broadcasting mainstream system. Now they've got a guy owning the Washington Post, whose name is Jeff Bezos, who also owns Amazon, who also owns Whole Foods, and he owns the Washington Post, and they just took a cash infusion of like 7 or 8 times more money than the paper is even worth, $600 million and we're supposed to believe everything they say. It's incredible to me. Hey, can we get Seymour Hersh on to talk about this situation with the Russians? He says it's all bullshit. Well, we're not going to talk to Seymour Hersh. We're going to talk to some blonde chick on Fox News with her sleeves rolled up. She's never even heard of Operation Mockingbird or could manage all the syllables that it takes to say that thing. So, I mean, these guys are nuts. They've created a paradigm of, I don't know how people believe the CIA now. They go, oh, see, Hillary was supposed to win because the CIA said. When did the CIA say something that was cool and to your favor? Ever? Seriously.
I know. I know.
It's just amazing to me. But these layers of bullshit, sorry, I don't know if I can say that on your show.
Of course
they just come right off. They come right off when you rinse your third eye, your pineal gland, which is a thing that's in your eye that does help perceive. It's part of your sensory system. And it's kind of lying dormant in most of us. But when you take this oil, that crack, that'll come right off. That concrete cover that's on there, it'll just fall right off.
Absolutely. It's all the fluoride that calcifies the pineal gland, isn't it? I mean, it's something that I'm quite passionate about. The going back to Morgan Freeman, is celebrities and people in positions of influence that just abuse that by doing things like he's done, which is be given a movie script that he clearly knows nothing about and using his influence to just talk absolute rubbish when he's got no idea what he's talking about. And I guarantee a lot of people, a lot of fans of his won't have reacted the way we are now, going, what's he doing? They'll be buying it. And it's...
Oh, sure.
It's madness. If you're in a position of power or influence or people look up to you, then you can't be speaking about things you don't know what you're talking about. It's dangerous, really dangerous.
Yeah. Well, I don't think the CIA cares about that. I think what they have there is they've ascertained, as have we all, over the past several years, 15 years or so, that Morgan Freeman is a trusted, I'm talking tonally, I'm talking listen to his voice. He's a trusted, loved actor. He cuts it really well with white folks who don't really like black folks. There's a certain amount of black folks that are okay with white folks, right? Like Bill Cosby used to be that before he came out as a disastrous serial offender. But he's a black guy that white people were okay with, even racist people. There's certain guys that have been able to do it. And so Morgan Freeman is one of those guys. And so all they did was say, we need to get the most trustworthy guy out there, Morgan Freeman. Now give him a bunch of money, just like an actor reading a script. Perfect. Now give him a script. Now he reads it. That's the whole thing. That's all it is.
Yeah, it's just madness. Absolute madness.
If you get Tony Danza or somebody like that reading the same script, it's not going to have the the same gravity, No, I'm telling you, Russia's doing all of this stuff, but we got to shut them down. Oh, we got to get this thing finished. They're not going to believe him, but they're going to believe, well, I guess we have to go to Moscow and shut down Mr. Putin. They're going to believe that. So, despite all of the evidence to the contrary, and like you were saying in the intro, any evidence of this stuff in the first place, like let's see the P tape. Let's show us the P tape that you have, that you saw Trump and hookers and stuff. Let's see it. Like, why don't they show that, right? But this is where I think we really get to something with the government and the systems, and I know your family is deeply invested into this type of knowledge, but when you get down to all of these people saying these same things, there has to be a larger hand at hand, because just like with Canadian and Ontario cannabis laws, most people don't want it, right? And I think the problem is the other side, the good guys, the good guys, they're always so wrong. Like they said, well, there's no way Trump can get the nomination. He gets the nomination. There's no way he's actually going to win. He wins. There's no way he's actually going to get sworn in the first week. He gets sworn in the first week. There's no way he's going to last more than a week on the job. He lasts more than a week on the job. Well, he's not going to be able to sustain this Jim Comey investigation. He sustains it. Oh, we got Robert Mueller going after him now. Now we're going to see some action, and Robert Mueller still hasn't done anything. And you know why I think all that is because I think if Robert Mueller and James Comey and all of those kinds of people who are supposed to be the white knight going to fix this terrible Trump problem, I think what happens is if you go digging deep enough and you find some business dealings, and I'm sure he has them with business dealings with Russians and various other people, that's all good and fine. But I think if you keep pulling that onion apart, you're going to see all kinds of Democratic folks with business deals in Russia. And you know what I mean? Like I can't pick on Jaymie for stealing the tomatoes from the neighbor's yard if I was with you. I can't push that too hard because eventually you're going to go, well, you were there too, right? So you can't really give up the store. And I think that's why they just can't really, as they say they want to get rid of him. They've been saying that for a year now. Yep. They want to get rid of him, and they can't seem to do it. And I think that the reason is if you push him so hard, eventually you will be compromised. The people that want to get rid of him, by going deep enough to expose all of Trump's bona fide wrongdoings wherever they are. It's not just going to be his wrongdoings that show up. No, well, you'll struggle to find a more corrupt, bent politician than Hillary and Bill Clinton. And the fact that they're the ones that are supposedly leading this, well, more her, leading this charge to impeach Trump and to expose him for what he really is. I mean, in the campaign, I had to laugh about all the stuff they were talking about with Trump's links to Russia, etc. I mean, you only got to look back through about a year of Clinton's political career to see enough that she should be in jail for the rest of her life, let alone fit for president. I'm afraid we're running out of time, Alan. We're gonna we're gonna have to wind it up now. Okay. I'll just a final question. So, effectively, given what doctors told you in 2014, you shouldn't be here now. So you're you're getting a second life, if you like. So what does the future hold for you, and what's the plans from now on? Yeah, well, it's a totally different life, that's for sure. Lost a lot of friends and some loved ones through this journey. Not dying, just people not behind it and not believing, not interested. So I'm on my own in that way. I do have the show that I'm trying to put out. I've got a little team. We're trying to build it. I want to go around and talk about this because people are starting to get that the official government version, just like on all kinds of topics, is not valid on this one. And I just want to put myself forward as one of the most experienced in the way of using this, most aware and most successful people battling this terrible disease, which has caused all kinds of problems to so many lives, including my own. I mean, I didn't get through this thing physically 100% unscathed. I'm still here, though. I'm good. I've got my health. I don't have the cancer issue, but it made some damage along the way. It didn't need to, but now I understand things a lot better. And I'm just trying to help other people realize that there are these other ways to go. I'd say this real quick. I'd hate myself if I didn't squeeze this in. So here's how it goes. You're going to get a diagnosis sometime, and if that happens, they're not going to start fixing you the next day with surgery or chemo or whatever. There's going to be a period of time goes by, 2 weeks, 5 weeks, 10 days, a month and a half, 5 months. I don't know. And they're going to say, at that time, you need to do chemo or you need to do radiation and we'll get you in later. And they know that you're just physically deteriorating from the diagnosis until the treatment day. But guess what? The treatment day, they're going to run those same numbers again on you on that day. So my basic advice to anyone, including the caller earlier, the Twitter person earlier, is this. As soon as you find out that you have this disease, never mind about taking it as a food and mummy's breast milk and all of that from a long time ago, you're in trouble. You need this oil to get you out of there. So try this oil, and you will see that by the time my Siri's going off for some reason. But by the time you get diagnosed, you can obtain that oil within a day or two once you go back home. Pretty much, somewhere. I'll leave that to you. I'm just one man in one country in one region. I can't tell everyone in the world where to get this, but find out where you can get it. And find out from those websites I mentioned earlier, careyourowncancer.org and phoenixtears.ca. Find out how to make this oil and start taking it immediately, because by the time you get your diagnosis and you move down the calendar timeline until they actually bring you in and your top-notch expert is telling you things, your numbers are going to be better, you're going to be feeling better, and you're going to have that to offer him as or that doctor when you start your treatment. You're going to say, yeah, I know I was already at 27, but now I'm only a 9. And I kind of want to ride this out for a little bit longer, because what you can do if you get those numbers going in your favor in a week or 10 days, and it only takes 3 or 4 days to get some kind of an awareness of it. If you get in 10 days or 2 weeks or more, and then you are moving along towards your chemo date or towards your surgery date or whatever it is, you may find those tumors and those measurements and those spots and those blood levels or whatever the markers are in your particular cancer case much lower. And when that happens and you're feeling it and you've taken this oil, you might find yourself in a place where you say to the doctor, look, we've already waited 2 months for this. Let's give it another 2 months. And he'll say, no, we got to do this now. You say, nah, it's my case. Let's just let it go another couple of months. And you might see a really incredible turnaround in those numbers. So many people do.
Absolutely fantastic. Thank you very much for joining us tonight, Alan. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Pleasure talking to you, and I trust you're doing well, and thank you very much. And anytime you want to talk about this or you have some ideas about it, I am here. At Green Crush Pod, just getting it out there one more time, at Green Crush Pod, check us out. We are really helping people find out about things and empowering themselves to give themselves a better chance than what they might be given by the mainstream system.
We'll put a URL for the show in the podcast description and on the Facebook post after the show tonight. Thanks very much.
Fantastic. Thanks very well, Jaymie. Be well.
You too. Alan Park live on the line there from Toronto, Canada. Absolutely fascinating, guys. I mean, we've carried that conversation on a little bit longer than we planned to, but I mean, it's just fascinating. I'm actually having the opportunity to speak to somebody who's had a personal experience with the alternative cancer treatments, and he's living it. Living proof. 2014, he's told he's got 10 months to live. He's here with us September 2017. Absolutely fine. I met him a few weeks ago. He looks as healthy as you and me. And it's the fact that people like that have to come on alternative shows like this to really get their story out is just something that I will never understand. This is something that should be being shouted from the rooftops on the mainstream media. Something that affects one in 3 people in the UK supposedly get cancer. So that affects more than 1 in 3, doesn't it? Because your family, your friends, it's just the fact that this is something that is not being the most important story that's being put out there. We were saying about the news and how negative it is and how it's promoting fear and it's promoting anxiety in people. This is something that people would be jubilant about. There'd be parties in the street in the same way that back years ago when a cure for smallpox was found, and it was that was incredible. It gave people a lease of life. And it's the same with cancer. And the fact that the cures are there and the treatments are there, and it's something I'll never begin to understand. And yeah, I mean, I could speak about that all night alone. So the phone lines are now open. We've only got about 15 minutes or so left, so I probably have